But, if you're a good athlete, you work on the fundamentals. You want a good marriage, you work on your fundamentals. So paragraph 1601 says, the matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves as partnerships of the whole of life is by its nature ordered towards the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of the offspring. This covenant between the baptized person has been raised by Jesus Christ the Lord to a dignity of a sacrament. Do you see what it said? For the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. When I see education, I just want to remind you, I don't believe you can take your kids to public school today with the culture of death that's out there today. I would highly recommend you find some private schools that believe in original sin. There's some good Catholic schools out there. But as a husband and wife, you're responsible for the education. You're first and foremost, not the teachers. That's your job to be that teaching.
How do we make it so that our religion is back to the top, back to the majority of the people following the Catholic faith? We have to start with education. There was another great article I found. We're going to go through this article. I'll put the link to this one down below as well. And it's the failure of modern Catholic education. Remember back in the days, remember when we were growing up and everybody said, gosh, I want my kid to go to a Catholic school, whether they were Catholic or not, especially if they were in a lower socioeconomic area, they lived in an area of poverty. All of a sudden they said, I don't like the public schools here. They're not being funded well. They don't have the same resources. And I don't know that my child's going to learn as well. Let's get them into a Catholic school because I know that Catholic education was renowned for excellence in academics, excellence in sports, just excellence in anything that they did. Why? Because it was about being excellent towards God. We had the base, the foundation of prayer in our schools, asking God to fill our lives, asking God to come to our schools. I'm not saying we're perfect. We're still full of humans. It's not like people didn't sin there. It's not like they were 100%, free from any issues. But what I'm saying is, at least the idea was that we were striving towards God and towards improving ourselves in our morality. I say improving, working on it. But without that, then what do we have left? Well, let's look at this article. A failure of modern Catholic education. This article says, the vast majority of America's Catholic schools have become secularized. As such, they are too often spiritually dangerous places for child, adolescent, or young adult. It's interesting. My wife and I talk about this as our kids go to, we're lucky enough that our kids do go to a Catholic school. But we're talking about, let's look at once they're done with the elementary school, the junior high, they're going to have to go to high school. And the Catholic high schools, are they teaching the Catholic faith? Or are they teaching the students to veer away from the Catholic faith? Let's see what this article says. Public schools are much worse, the Catholic parent might say, perhaps, but public schools don't claim the one true faith. And this is true. This is one of our concerns. It is scandalous that Catholic schools dilute the faith because children who attend such schools developed a warped idea of what it means to be a follower of Christ. Instead of swimming upstream and dying to self, students are strongly taught living the faith is not very different from living in and of the world. It's very true. One of the things that my wife and I talk about is, gosh, if we're going to send them to a Catholic school and we're going to make the sacrifice ourselves to pay for the tuition and all these things, and if they go to this Catholic school and they're being taught a watered down faith, I think that's actually counterintuitive. That's actually going to hurt them more than going to a public school where they're not taught anything necessarily about the Catholic faith. And it's incumbent upon us as parents, as it always is, to teach them the truth of our faith. But what's the danger of going to a Catholic school? Well, Dr. Sandoval, what do they do? What if the only Catholic school around is a little watered down? It's okay, but it's still Catholic. Well, here's the problem. I send them there and they come home and I try to tell them, no, this is what our Catholic faith teaches. This is what the church teaches. And they're going to say, I don't know, Dad. You're sending me to a Catholic school, and at the Catholic school, they taught me something different. I might believe that because it's a little bit easier to follow, and it's Catholic because you're sending me to the Catholic school. And I'm going to say, no, that's not Catholic. And they're going to say, well, I don't know about that. I was taught that at the Catholic school. I think that's much more damaging. How do you fix that? This is the problem with if we ever have a priest teaching heresy. If anybody ever says, the host, the communion, the Eucharist, it's more of a, symbol. It's bread. It's kind of what Jesus wanted us to do. No, it's not the real body and blood of Christ. No, it's not like that. That's dangerous. That's dangerous in and of itself. It doesn't matter who's teaching that, especially if it's a priest or a bishop or some authority in a Catholic school, because my kids are going to come home and I'm going to tell them, hey, this is the body and blood of Christ. We have to receive this every Sunday. We believe that this is the body and blood of Christ, and it is the body and blood of Christ, whether we believe it or not. That's what's in the Eucharist. There's a transubstantiation. You might not see it, but it's no longer bread and wine. It looks like it, but the reality is it is the body and blood of Christ. How do I undo poor Catholic teaching? It might be harder to undo poor Catholic teaching than say, hey, go to a public school and let me teach you exactly what the faith is. Well, let's go on and see what the article goes on to say. Christ commands his followers to deny themselves and take up their cross daily. He adds, blessed are those who are persecuted. But the typical Catholic school teachers treat public sin like normal part of development. That's just the way people are, is the rationalization, which is why moral correction is uncommon. That's important right there, moral correction. Do we have that anymore? The problem is that in society nowadays, all we hear is, oh, it's okay, you do you. Which is good, not a problem. You can do you. But the reality is, if I say you do you, it means that there's no set morality. You do what you need to do, whether it's moral or not. I'm going to do what I need to do, whether it's moral or not. And we don't have the sense of, hey, this is what's right and wrong. Why? Because that's where you need Catholicism. That's where you need our faith. That's where we follow our faith to direct us to what is the truth. The truth of Jesus Christ. And from that follows our morality. Let's see here. Ultimately, the students learn nothing about the cross and self-denial, instead becoming exponents of indifference. Well, that can be a little challenging right there, right? All of a sudden, everything's indifferent. And if you've heard other shows before, what happens with indifference? That's called being lukewarm. And our Lord does not like lukewarm Catholics. He doesn't like lukewarm anybody. It's not about being indifferent. You got to make a decision. Those are the worst offenders, our Lord says. He says, if you're lukewarm, I'm gonna chew you up and spit you out. There's nothing good about that. You haven't made a decision. It says, obviously, the teacher's failures to correct their students' morals comes from the fact that they, generally speaking, do not correct their own. Like we've been saying, folks, we got to start with ourselves. I got to check myself first. Where am I in my life? Where am I in my Catholic life? Am I following what I truly believe? And do I believe that which the church teaches? Because I might follow what I believe. Guess what? Every day I'm going to follow what I believe. But at that moment, I got to ask myself, what do I believe? If I'm going to sin, and I've sinned knowingly, then in that moment of sin, I believe that that's okay. I don't believe the Catholic teachings anymore. Now, there's a difference between succumbing to that and saying, gosh, I'm human. I have temptations. I still believe in the church teachings. I better get myself to confession because I know something wasn't right there. Versus saying, I'm just going to go my way. I'm going to do it my way. I don't have to worry about confession because what I am doing is correct. That's where we can fall into that trap.